Hey everyone, welcome back to the railroad, the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision in HO scale. My name is Daryl Cruz, owner and builder of the layout, and your host for a special review of the ESU LokProgrammer and Decoder tester. A while back I made the decision to switch over all of my decoders to ESU, so I'm in the process of replacing Soundtraxx decoders with ESU LokSound. And in order to help that process, I picked up a LokProgrammer as well as their decoder tester to help me in programming my existing ESU decoders, and then of course help me in installing the new ESU decoders. So this is a pretty big project, a lot of decoders to switch over. I think I've done about 10 so far, and probably have about 20 more to do. But here's the LokProgrammer by ESU, and then I also picked up the decoder tester. Wasn't sure if I would need the decoder tester or not, but I thought I would go ahead and pick up one and see what it was about and kind of figure out whether or not it was worthwhile to have. Here's a schematic of all of the ESU components, decoders as well as the programmer, and then a whole DCC system. So I could possibly at some point switch over the whole layout to ESU. I'm not sure if I will or not, but I definitely will look at that as an option. All right, so it comes in this typical plastic packaging. Here's the LokProgrammer itself. Not very many contacts or connections to make. There's a couple of ways to connect to the programming track. You have a plug that you can wire into, or you could permanently use those two cylinders, I guess, to put wires into. I'm not sure if they expect you to solder it. There's a couple LEDs there as well. A serial connection to the computer, which I was a little bit surprised about. A power supply, 9-volt power supply, and then they have some lovely messages here for you. There's a video that they kind of point you to, and then also some downloads that you can do, making sure that you have the newest firmware and everything, which is one of the advantages of this LokProgrammer, is that not only is the programmer itself upgradable with new firmware, but it also, the decoders are updatable with new firmware. Here's the cable to connect it to the computer. I was surprised a bit by the serial connection, which is pretty old, but it does connect to your computer with a USB. But I think it's probably the main communication is serial, but it's good that they have it to connect to your computer with USB, because very few computers have serial connections anymore. Here's the decoder tester. This is a kind of a cool device, and it enables you to connect the decoder that you purchased straight to this tester, and then you can connect the tester up to the LokProgrammer, and you can program your decoder with this tester without even installing it. So if you look all around it, it has all these different connections. So you can connect it with 8-pin, the Next 18, the something 22, E24. There's a Next 18. There's the one I've been using the most, is the 21-pin connections. Now here's if you want to connect up lights to it, or connect a separate motor to it. If you want some external connections. Those aren't really needed because they also have the LEDs on the board that will light up, and then they actually have a motor there as well that you can run with a decoder. And then of course they also have a speaker, so you can basically plug any of their decoders into this decoder tester, and you can not only test it, but you can program the whole thing and get it exactly how you want it before you actually install it. I would think this would be a must-have if you're a vendor and you're selling ESU decoders, because it will allow you to load a sound file into it before you shipped it out to whoever purchased it. These decoders come blank. Here's my computer setup, but the decoders become blank, so they have to be loaded with a program. Here's my computer, just a cheap Chinese computer. And then this is my keyboard and mouse. I basically sit on my comfy sofa, use the TV as a monitor. And then I kind of mounted everything on this board. I actually painted the board green, mounted the LokProgrammer to the layout, have it plugged into from the serial connector to the computer and powered up. And then I put a programming track and the tester on this board. And the idea is I was going to use this then to program. And if I ever needed to program, I would take that out, set it on the table. And I have this long wired connection between the two. You have to make sure there's enough slack there so it lays flat on the floor. There was a couple times where I kicked it with my foot and yanked it out of the tester, but it is just a plug, so it didn't hurt anything. Now that I've kind of got used to using it, I'm pretty good about not doing that. So that's the wires from the programmer, and then I have a little clip there to connect the programming track. So right now, this is the engine I'm going to work with to begin with. This is an Intermountain Tier 4 Gevo that I bought without any sound. And I bought this probably 3 years ago, and I put a Soundtraxx decoder in it, a Tsunami 2, and then I also put in a Scale Sound Systems speaker in it. So it's got a really good speaker, but I wanted to switch it over from Soundtraxx decoder to ESU. And I very quickly here, I have this on double time. I don't work this fast, by the way. And I'm a little bit more gentle than this, but I didn't want to sit here and watch this for too long, so did not take much to take it off, and the shell comes off. The Intermountain, this is a great locomotive, pulls like crazy. It's very, very heavy, and it's nice that you don't have any wires from the shell to the chassis, and it does have the 21 pin. So I just very carefully with my fingers remove the pin. It comes off easily. That's the Soundtraxx Tsunami 2. Nice decoder, worked well, but I'm switching over to ESU. I'll go over a little bit why I'm switching over in a bit. I did a previous video on my reasons for switching over, how it actually takes place. This is a forget the exact number, but it's basically it's a blank 21 pin Loc-Sound 5. I think it's just their DCC. For some reason it's got some wires connected to it. I was kind of wondering about that. Wasn't sure why there were wires connected to it. Looked a little bit closer at it and looked at some documentations. Those two wires are for the track power, right and left track power. So I'm not sure why. There may be some locomotives that have the 21 pin but not connected to the track power, or maybe somebody might want to install this into a locomotive that does not have the 21 pin. But anyway, it fits very easily into the decoder tester. Here's the program. I installed it. You can, of course, download it from the ESU website. And this is just the general interface. This is what you come up with first. And you can then read the decoder information from there. You can do it from the main track or from the programming track. It also has a driver's cab on there that you can then test it out. And then you can also test out turnout control. I guess it's for ESU stationary decoders for turnout control. Now, for programming on the main, you can only do that if you have the ESU DCC system. So I have Digitrax for my main system. I cannot program on the main with this. I can just do it on the programming track or with the tester. All right, so to get a just an idea of what the interface is, I just opened up a LokSound 5 interface, and this is what you come up with. Our first page is for entering it in the locomotive address, and then you can enable it to be a consist. This is kind of a nice setup where you can just click the ones that you want it to, the functions that you want it to acknowledge when it's in a consist. So that's a very easy way to do that. There is a page here for analog settings, and then a page for brake settings. I haven't done a lot with brakes yet. I want to eventually at some point in time, but I don't do any braking now. One of the main reasons is because I run a lot of Soundtraxx together with the ESU, so braking isn't always exactly the same, but I just need to do a little bit more research on that. But I will eventually like to do braking. Here you have the brake 1, brake 2, brake 3. I know the Soundtraxx also has brake 1, brake 2, so I think I could do it with a difference, but I haven't really just got around to spending the time to do that. I would like to do that sometime. Here's some DCC settings. If you have a ESU system, you can have it be Railcom, to where you can actually then program on the main, and you can actually read the decoder values when you have the locomotive on the main. So that's definitely a plus if you want to do the ESU digital system as well. I don't have that, so I unclicked it. You can also do the trimming forward and reverse, load adjustment, gearbox, backlash, not sure what some of these are, power packs, how long you want it to do to stay live when its power is cut. Preserve direction between the two. Starting delay, I usually unclick that because, again, compatibility between Tsunami and ESU. It doesn't work well if you have one of them delaying the startup when the other one's not. And then here you have the different function outputs. And these are just generic, so nothing's labeled. When you load a sound file or you start working with specific decoder, you can, once you figure out what each one goes to, you can type in and label each of the outputs with whatever light they control on the locomotive. Usually the rear light, headlight, and rear light are pretty consistent. F0 is always the headlight, but the rest of them, ditch lights are usually 1 and 2, but then The rest of them are who knows what. So you have to kind of figure that out as you go. Once you get it into the Locomotive, there's different things you can do. Also, the type of output mode you want to have. So it could be a strobe light or gyrating light or a ditch light or fade in and out and so forth. So you can do all kinds of different things with that. You can do the whether it's dimmable. If it's dimmer, that means when you press the dim function key, the light will dim. Sometimes you don't want it to dim. For example, you would want the headlight to dim, but you wouldn't want the number boards to dim. So things like that can be set up. Then you have all the different function settings that you can adjust. General physical output settings. I haven't really used these too much. There's a lot to learn about this. I mean, you can be functional and be able to program things effectively without knowing everything. But as you learn, and as I'm learning, you're able to do a lot more. Now, this is where one of the reasons why I went with ESU as opposed to Digitrax, as opposed to the Soundtraxx Tsunami, and that is that you have a lot more flexibility. Now, my capture program here is not picking up the drop-down scrolling, so I'm actually, there's a window that actually appears. It's not being picked up on my capture, but if you can look, I can see that I can put not something as well as it being on. And then for speed setting, you can do either the 3 values, start, mid, and high, or you can use the speed curve. And I have it all jumbled up there, but you can do different things. You can use the graph there and pull the different items back and forth, or you can use the actual index and put in a precise number. I just use this here. So there's index 1, and you can put it down to whatever you want or up whatever you want. So now I'm on 2, and you can do that way, or you can just pull it up and down with the graph. And there's other settings that you can do for speed control. This is something, again, you could, I am not an expert at this, but you can definitely do a lot. I usually just use the default values. They usually work pretty good in HO scale. If you're in N scale, I think that is something that you really do need to mess around with and learn. But then you have special options, not much there. Sound settings, you can set the master volume here. You can do things with Steam, but for me, the master volume you can set. It's usually way higher than it should be. I usually set it down to around under 100 at least. Then you have bass and treble control. I usually put the bass up to 32. I tried doing the treble to 0, but then you can't hear the whistle or bell. So I basically leave the treble at 16 and put the bass up to 32. You can do that on Soundtraxx also, on the Tsunami 2s. And then you can adjust the break sound. And then they have dynamic sound control, where you can have it do something with the train load. And I didn't see any documentation in the decoder instructions, but then when I looked on the LokProgrammer, it basically just said that it's a beta option and good luck messing around with it. Soundtraxx does have the dynamic digital exhaust, and so they have a lot more documentation about that, which also changes according to the load. Running consist, it's really not something I've been able to do very effectively. And then here, of course, you can do individual CV values, and there are a lot of them. You not only have hundreds of CVs, but then you have the different pages. So like there's 3 pages, and So anyway, that works out pretty good. Now, this is the same program, but I've switched over to just taking it off of the TV. It shakes a little bit, but you'll be able to see the drop-down menus, which my capture program was not able to. All right, so the first thing I'm doing here is I'm reading the information from the decoder. Now, this is a blank decoder, but it does have some CVs set and so forth, set to 3, of course. What's cool is that when you read the information, then you can go to the driver's cab, turn it on, and then if you look closely, or you can hear it, this is the only sound that's in there, along with a very annoying horn. Now, you have to look very closely when I do lights, because right now there's 2 brown wires at the top connecting in. There's 2 LEDs where it says track in, and there are LEDs, and if you look closely, you can see them lighting up. And as I'm pressing the function keys, okay, you have more and more of the LEDs lighting up. Okay, now I don't have the F1 lit up. I have to be, so function 1 isn't necessarily going to be the output 1. Okay, so I always thought they were the same, but they're not. So functions, all the different function numbers are not the same as the outputs. They're called auxiliaries, at least for ESU. There's the main light that lights up the most, but you can see it. And then you can see the motor. I put a piece of tape on the motor so you can see it turning. Actually, I put it on there so I could see it turning when I was using it. Now it's spinning so fast now you can't see the tape, but you can hear the motor kind of revving up a little bit as it gets higher. And you can hear the motor spinning at high revolutions. And then it comes back down. We'll be able to see the little tape there, and it's down to stopping. So it's pretty cool that you can go to the decoder, make changes and so forth on decoder, try different sound files and so forth, and how you want it to go, and then you can see how it actually works on the decoder tester. All right, now this is a GEVO Tier 4, so you go to the ESU website, and they have a bunch of files that you can use for almost every locomotive that's out there. And so this is one for the GEVO. This is a late exhaust. I usually look at which one has the most recent one. So they had 2 for the Tier 4 GEVO. One was from 2019, the other one was from 2024. And it had the late exhaust and so forth, so I went ahead and got the one that has the late exhaust. There it is on downloads, and I'm opening it up, and now this sound file is loaded onto the computer, but then we need to write it to the decoder. Now, generally speaking, when you write to the decoder, writing the CV values goes very quickly. However, writing all the sound files takes longer. It can take up to a half hour. So actually getting the sound files onto the decoder takes a while. But getting the CV values back and forth is very, very quickly. I now have the sound files loaded into the decoder, and we can now hear F8 is a startup, kind of the default startup for ESU Loc So I press F8, and everything is, the locomotive time mover is starting up. F1, hear the bell. F2 is the horn, very loud. One thing I figured out too, you have to kind of not adjust the sound volume. That's a coupler. until you get it in the Locomotive, because how it sounds on the tester is not going to be the same volume as what you'll have in the Locomotive. All right, and you can see all the different lights coming on also. Now what's kind of cool is that he automatically puts the different definitions and little icons for different ones. So you have the flange squeal. Now you're not hearing anything because it's not moving. So as you can see, the little pop-up comes up to where you can see what each one is for. Again, if you have the DCC, the ESU DCC system on your throttle, if you have a ESU throttle, that these same icons will appear on your throttle. So that's kind of a cool feature. Also, they also have a local net adapter, so you can actually use your Digitrax or other systems throttles if you have the ESU digital system, which was important to me because I have a lot of Digitrax throttles that I want to continue to use. And here you can see I think it has a delay on, so it takes a while for it to start turning. So you can just kind of play around with it, see how things work, and get things tested out. So I think I have this on 28. There's a way to put it on 128. And if you click on the stop, it'll basically turn off the power to the tester, and now you're back to the decoder. And now I'm going to be able to put in values for this Locomotive. So the DCC address is 2721. Of course, you have to put it as long address first before I don't know how many times I've done that. Had to enter the number twice, but you have to put it as long address first and then put in the 4-digit address. Okay, I'm not going to do any consisting just yet. I usually take off the Railcom. If I ever do switch over to ESU system, I will, of course, keep that on. All right, now here they have, if you notice, there are some labels for all the different things, but they don't really know. So this sound file I got from ESU, they don't really know what model it's going into, whether it's going into a Intermountain makes a Tier 4 as well as scale trains, and I think there may be some others that make the Tier 4 GEVOs. So this won't necessarily correspond to your Locomotive. But I know that the ditch lights are usually auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2. At least that's been my experience. So here I'm changing auxiliary 4 to number boards. I'm just guessing. I have no idea. But I know that's one of the things I want to have controlled. I'm using my phone to record this sound. That's why you hear my email sound. And so they have rear ditch lights. There are some Tier 4 for other roads besides Union Pacific that do have ditch lights on the rear. Not doing anything with the function settings, but I do change. Here's how I change the function mapping. First thing I do is I take off the stupid directional lighting. So forward, reverse, and forward. For forward and reverse, F0 is always going to be the front light. And then I also put in the number boards and the emergency lights, which is like the, not really emergency lights, the walkway lights and the ground lights. So I have if you have F0 on, you also turn on the headlight, and then you also turn on the number boards, and you turn on the lighting around the locomotive. I'm not sure if that's prototypical, but that's just kind of the way I've been setting it up for now. I might change it. As you take off the grade crossing, a lot of times they'll have where when you blow the horn, it'll turn on the bell also, which I might put that back in, but for right now I'm taking that off, all of mine. So F1 is the bell, F2 is the horn. I always take off, right now I'm not doing any braking, so I always take off the brakes on all of the function keys. And the main reason I do that is because I've had lots of cases where an operator will somehow press a function key that they didn't know that they pressed, and then they'll come to me and asking me why their engine won't move, and it basically, a lot of times it'll be because they have the brake on. So I take all the brakes off so we don't have that issue. F5 I usually assign to the rear light, and then F6 comes usually for the ditch lights, but instead of having that for the ditch lights, I will keep it as ditch lights, but then I will put it on F0 on, and then F7 off. Now you notice I have F6 on there, and F1 went on. One thing I found out right away, which I hope that they will fix on an upgrade or a firmware upgrade, is that if you have the cursor over the little drop-down menus and you do the scroll thing on the mouse, it changes the on or off or ignore. So a lot of times I'm trying to scroll up and down, but I inadvertently changed whether something is on ignore, yes or no. So you have to use the bar there, the scroll bar with your cursor, not use the scroll roller on the mouse. All right, so anyway, notice I put F0 and not F7 for the ditch lights. So that's one thing that I cannot do with with the Soundtraxx. Now, then F8, since I'm running Soundtraxx together with ESU, I changed the F8 to volume control, and then all the other F8s I changed to F9. So I use F9 to start up the scale trains, and then I use F8 as volume control, which basically will mute it. Now, one thing I forgot to do here, which I have to, as you'll see, I'll have to come back and change that. But if you notice right now, I'm changing all the F8s to F9s. So on every place where there's an F8, I'm switching it over to F9. So F8 goes to ignore, F9 to on. I just go down the whole list and taking off any brakes if there are any here. Here's another F9. So taking off the brake and taking off the drive hold. Drive hold is a pretty cool feature, I think, for ESU decoders, but if you're consisting with Tsunami 2s, it doesn't work, since they don't all work together. All right, so I'm taking off the brakes. Anything else here? Oh yeah, then my dim, I put that to 7 instead of 12. So I'm on for 7, off or ignore for 12. And that's, I think, just about everything. I think there's one more break I have to do. Now, one thing, when I changed the first F8, I changed it to volume control. That was actually turning the prime mover on. So I actually forgot to do that. I'll have to come back. You'll see when I get to it, I'll have to come back and have F9 set for turning the prime mover on, taking a break off there. All right, so that's pretty much everything, except for what I'm going to have to come back and fix. All right, so then I do write decoder data. And again, you have a choice to do it on the main track, but that's only if you have the ESU system. And it's very quickly writing the data. All right, and then here I now am going to test out my changes on my decoder tester. So I have F8 on, so I've got to take that off because that's now mute. So I have to have that off in order to hear anything. Okay, that turns on the light. You can see the headlight go on there and off. On. And off. On again. And there's the bell. There's the horn. Right, and then F5 does a rear light, but F7, as you see, that dims the headlight and turns on the ditch lights, which is 1 and 2 there. And if I take the F7 off, okay, the ditch lights come back on. So that's working appropriately. So F7 on, dim, and no ditch lights, F7 off, bright, and ditch lights. Now I don't have any sound here, and if you can see I was trying to figure out what is going on here. Why isn't it working? It took me a little while to figure out. You can see the motor's working and everything. So I had to go back to the decoder. And then had to put back in the F9 turns on the prime mover. So I just use this empty slot here and go down to F9 on, and then have it turn on sound slot 1. Now you notice all the sound slots are labeled, which is really nice with this programmer. Once you load a sound file, you don't just have slot 1, slot 2, slot 3. You actually have them all labeled. So that's very, very convenient. And we'll go ahead and turn it back on here now. And click F9. And it starts up. And we go ahead and test it's moving. And everything works according to plan. Alright, next thing then is to go ahead and remove it from the decoder tester. Comes off very easily. I did snip off the wires, and now I have it loaded into a locomotive. It's kind of hard to see there, but that is a picture of the locomotive. That's the chassis and I have the decoder installed in there. You won't be able to see the lights, but you can kind of and I'm rereading so now you can read the decoder still from the Locomotive. So you can do exactly the same things from the programming track as you could when it was plugged into the tester. All right, and so we go ahead and press go. Everything starts up. And this is where I had to then figure out which auxiliaries, which outputs corresponded to which lights, because I wanted to have the headlights, the ditch lights, of course, but then also the number boards and then the walkway lights. The Intermountain Tier 4 does not have ground lights. I probably will be adding those at some point in time. I want all my lead units of locomotives, loud. I want all my lead units of locomotives to have ground lights, walkway lights, number boards, ditch lights, headlight, of course, and then have ESU decoders. So that's kind of how we wanted things to go. And here we are on the layout. Here's the Locomotive. I just installed the ESU Sound Decoder in using the LokProgrammer as well as the tester. And some things I had to do in addition to what you saw is I had to make sure the outputs corresponded with the different lights, so I could get that all to work properly. And then I also did speed profiling to get it speed matched with all my other locomotives. And now it's ready to work on the layout, pulling trains on the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision. I think I would definitely highly recommend the LokProgrammer. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want to go with ESU or Soundtraxx Tsunami 2s. There's plus and minuses for both. You might want to check out my previous review on ESU decoders and my reasons why I went with ESU. You may have your own view on it. If you decide to go with ESU, you definitely need to get the LokProgrammer. I definitely found it indispensable for programming ESU decoders, and if you're going to go with them as your standard, definitely 100% need to get the LokProgrammer. Tester is pretty cool too. Let's say it would be a requirement, but it's not very expensive and something you might want to add. Also, if you're going to have a mixture of decoders, both TSU from Soundtraxx as well as ESU, it'll be up to you to decide whether or not you want to get the LokProgrammer. You can program ESU decoders with the JMRI Decoder Pro. I have been using it. I will say though that it takes about an hour to read, maybe even more, an hour or 2 hours to read all the CV values on the ESU decoders, because there's literally 1,000 to read. And not only with the ESU, it takes a long time to read the Soundtraxx on the Decoder Pro. With the LokProgrammer, you can read the entire CV values of the ESU decoders in a matter of seconds. It takes maybe 10 seconds at the most. You cannot do anything with the TSU decoders on the LokProgrammer. LokProgrammer only works on ESU decoders. So you will still, if you have both and you get the LokProgrammer, you can use it with the ESU decoders. You will not be able to use them with all the other decoders. So let me know what you think. I'm really happy that I got the LokProgrammer. Very happy with switching over to ESU. I might at some point get the ESU system. That's I'm kind of deciding about that. If I do, I definitely will do a review and you can see how it works with everything. Again, let me know what you think about the different types of decoders and the LokProgrammer. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great rest of your week and the upcoming weekend. Take care.